Humans, the great animal we like to think, is just as animalistic in its desire as a pig, so mustn't I accept fetishization? No. Trans people who are exemplary and previously respected, even worshipped for our gift of prophecy, must demand more. Chasers, cisgender people who treat us overvalued sexually and undervalued in our humanity, even all non-members, people who aren't queer must demand more of themselves than to be superficially obsessed with and alien to the abstract of our identities. All trannies, a slur for trans women reclaimed and used colloquially by trans women exclusively, know the constant experience of blocking chasers whose entire feed is tranny porn. Insecurity seeps into the mind. Social media is a place to share your interests and beliefs with people you never would have met without it, so to be viewed as a product is exhausting and pushes us away from what, for many, is our only way to contact other members of the community. Many of you direct message us at first, asking for very personal questions, then, regardless of subject and regardless of romantic pretenses, tell us you aren't interested because you aren't gay, only to later call us sexist terms for not accepting your aims. Rejection, or simply their trans-misogynistic, the fulcrum of misogyny, where you don't accept trans women as female but do hate us for our femininity, shame, often ends in our murders. The trans panic defense is legal in most of the US. An example of its use is when a man beat Islam Nettles, a black trans woman, to death. He turned himself in, saying he went into a blind fury when he found out the woman he was flirting with was trans, only to be temporarily let go, then arrested when the story attracted media attention. Nettles' killer was not charged with murder, as the trans panic defense clears him of intent. Instead, he served 12 years for manslaughter, rather than the minimum 20 for murder. The hate crime wasn't charged as such either. The killer was mocked by his friends for flirting with 2 other trans women 3 days prior to Nettles' killing. It's not that other cis people are or aren't supposed to date trans people. It's that they either fetishize us or have a no trans policy. It's not valid like people of color not dating white people, nor like T for T, trans people exclusively dating trans people. It's bigotry and inauthentic. Intersex people often aren't included in this conversation. They're seen often as transgender. They aren't necessarily, but they can be treated similarly. It's okay to not like certain traits like muscles, a certain genital, a certain height. It's just that it can change your sexuality. If you say you like women, you should likely be open to any kind of woman. When's the last time you heard someone say if they're dating a woman and she goes to the gym at all, they'll leave them? You might have, but it's nowhere near as common as the transphobic version of that. It's normal to lose sexual interest in someone because their body changes, although it is shallow. So if someone comes out to you as a trans person but nothing about their physicality or gender changes based on your former understanding of them, why should your interest change unless you're transphobic? Similarly, not knowing a cis woman had XY or a cis man had XXY chromosomes, for as example, then learning and becoming more or less interested in them is intersex phobic. Not that I'm a pro on that stuff, just listing out the basics here. Transmisogyny is the fulcrum, but the homophobic implications are important too. Both of their modern iterations' source is in white colonialism. The Christianity we live with across the globe is queerphobic. Westerners are usually queerphobic or have internalized queerphobia. It is strange to meet someone who you personally can't see as in some way inconsiderate, hateful, or fetishistic towards queer people. When queer people are queerphobic, like a so-called homophobic lesbian, it's an entirely different breed of issue. Unlike a sexist gay man, for example, it is internalized and representative of a deeper personal issue, and a lesbian doesn't like lesbians, a gay man doesn't like gays, or a tranny doesn't like trans people. Blair White considers herself one of the good ones, or that's how it seems, and and ContraPoints considers non-binary people confusing and often compares them to the bigoted idea of trans trenders. These are two different issues. ContraPoints isn't non-binary, but Blair White is a trans woman. Because White is a pick-me conservative, but not a transphobe, her opinions and actions clash with trans liberation. ContraPoints is NB-phobic, which as a whole, it's like, this layer on top of transphobia, it's the gravy on the meat. And she is such because she doesn't know their experience and speaks against them. Encouraging social issues non-binary people face, but it should be noted that, as she is a trans woman, her opinions, more often than not, can be internalized transphobia because many non-binary people are transgender and or transsexuals themselves. There's overlap, like how she doesn't respect non-binary people's pronouns but faces the same exact issue from cis people and even many non-binary people. I think some things should be taken note of. ContraPoints and Blair White are considered, at least partially, also patently ignorant of the issues of people of color, including trans and queer people of color. Trans women of color face transphobia, racism, sexism, and combinations of the three from everyone that those labels of identity can't be applied to all at once, like white trans women whose actions can be racist. Seth K., also known as Seth Reiki, a black trans masked person, an early viewer of ContraPoints, saw and commented on a video of hers not only dressing up as a Nazi, but imitating transphobes by creating an insult she supposed they use, which was sissy cracker, which he called out as unnecessary and insensitive. While ContraPoints always dresses up as other groups of people and her inner selves and conflicting thoughts that are similar to Raven in the Teen Titans cartoon, but she pushes it to the limit, a lot like South Park, Family Guy, or Rockstar Games. All three have patterns in their criticism, like she's shown. In Grand Theft Auto 5, Rockstar Games included as their only representation of transgender people, sex workers. While there is a timeless trend of transsexuals working in the sex industry due to fetishization, disenfranchisement, and less importantly, us typically being sexually liberated, many trans people are artists, business owners, construction workers, librarians, social workers, etc. None of this was shown. Also, they were all white. None of them were black and or Latin. When black and Latin trans women resort to sex work disproportionately more than any other trans people. Additionally, they exclusively used male character models with stubble and stereotypically deep gay voices. There were breasts, effeminate clothes and makeup added, and they positioned them in a representation of where, at least in 2013, real trans femme sex workers worked, which is potentially dangerous for them, as you could imagine. Feminizing male models took more work than using female models for them. Note, you can't cross-dress, wear makeup, or have breasts using a male character model in the online component of Grand Theft Auto. Many trans women who don't cis-pass, but do pass as women, exist and live across the world, but most trans women don't look conventionally or allegedly masculine at all. And we shouldn't be represented only as half-hearted cross-dressers. Finally, you can't hook up with them or pay them to have sex with your character, leaving the only interaction to be the most popular one between the player characters and the NPCs in the GTA franchise, killing them. That's all you can do with trans women in the GTA franchise that I know of, at least in the latest one. Acting like trans women and cis men are incompatible or not supposed to, or are gay for having sex is all too common, whereas cis women, especially trans exclusionaries, can fetishize or chase, again, trans people just as often as cis men. There's also a pattern of non-transsexual, non-binary people fetishizing transsexuals, or people who have eliminated from being seen as a female person to a male person or vice versa. People who are non-binary but aren't transsexuals often aren't excluded in cis people's genital preferences, which is a problem unto itself. Like, they're just being seen as exactly what they don't want to be seen as. And the same as transsexuals. So, what's really the worst part of it is that cis people are usually more violent, more fetishistic, and more conventionally publicly transphobic towards transsexuals. So sometimes the problems are different, sometimes they're the same, but more often than not, it's going to be in an increased version of the same problem, or problems non-binary people just don't face at all, to be honest. Unless that non-binary person has changed themselves hormonally. I think, the science part of it is sometimes all that cis people are really against. So if you come out as trans and then don't transition medically, and then you're like, oh wait, never mind, I'll wait until these people around me are less hateful, or until I have money to leave, they'll see you differently and in a negative way, similar to being non-binary. But the real violence happens when you try to actually, in their eyes, change. Why should your definition of straight, homosexual, etc. change when in contact with a transsexual, but include a non-binary person? Anybody can be non-binary, or trans in general, without their sexuality changing, or with a change when compared to pre-coming out, in other words, pre-transition. A cis woman often calls her attraction to a trans man sapphic, but a trans man calls their attraction to them straight. So, there's no winning. If trans people are going to be so honest with themselves, why can't cis people? Got 'em. The ultimate or most relevant point is that being attracted to trans people by itself can't make you gay or bi or straight or hypersexual or a sex addict. Being gay is being sexually or romantically and sometimes platonically interested in people of the same sex, and yes, trans women are female, trans men are male, and non-binary people are both or neither or whatever they say they are. Just listen to people about themselves, okay guys? Being non-binary exists outside of or uniquely is involved with the gender non-binary. It changes based on the self-identification and self-understanding according to every individual person. This is true of intersex people and transitioning and transitioned people medically too. So the next time you, a cis person, are attracted to a trans person, don't get angry, get humble, because we are beautiful. Bam, 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 bam.